Okay, the side that you're gonna start on doesn't necessarily mean it's the side your flap is on. So you're gonna see my flap is on the front, but I actually will start on the back side for removing. And so what I'm gonna do is go to that very first warp string piece that I taped on, and I'm gonna remove that. This string is gonna come through, I'm gonna flip it over, and then I'm going to start cutting across the back and tying them in double knots like I did in 5th grade. Okay, so now I've cut and tied all the way across the back side. So I'm gonna flip it over and I'm gonna start doing the same thing on the front, although these I do not need to cut because I should be able to pull out the leftovers that were cut from the back side. All right, I'm on the end, so I'm gonna end up with 3 strings. So I'm gonna do, much like I would have done last year if I had an uneven amount of warp strings. I'm gonna place 2 strings in one hand, 1 in the other, and tie them as though I were tying 2 together, but in reality I have 3. Okay, so now the top is completely cut and removed from the board. So the flap is off as well. So now I'm not going to do any cutting on the bottom side. Instead, at this point, I only cut on the top side for 6th grade, and I'm gonna start pushing down my weaving to slide it off the bottom of the board. So notice on this side, I'm starting to see that bottom warp string that I taped down originally. As soon as I see that, I can start releasing the tape from the board, and that's gonna help get my weaving to come off the bottom of the board as well. So I'm gonna take off the tape that's still stuck to that string. And that string is actually at the very bottom of the bag on the inside. So I'll deal with that one in a few minutes. And since I have the shag pattern, I cannot flip my bag inside out. If I didn't have the shag pattern, I could just flip it inside out and all these knots would disappear. But instead, I'm going to want this side to be my front side. So all these knots are gonna get pushed and pulled through, so they're not on the back side anymore. They're on the inside. Okay, so at this point I put all the knots, oops, I missed one, to the inside of the bag. So what I'm gonna do next is some cleanup. If I have, most likely you're gonna end with a string hanging off to the side from where you finished your flap. So you can cut that one, release your needle, return your needle, and then tie that to your ending warp string, okay? And then my warp strings, if you want to keep them long, you can. Certainly I'm gonna trim them up. I would not trim them right up to the knot on your warp string, because you may end up, if you trim it too close, it may end up unraveling. But you can certainly trim these up pretty close. Okay, so I think I've pretty much trimmed up all my warp strings. Now, the other thing I could do is, if I wanted to, I could trim off some of the length from the knots, so I don't have to have that quite so long. The ones on the inside, you know, I could flip this inside out and just cut the ones that bother me a little bit if they're too long, but that's a personal preference. The last thing that you're going to have is you will have the warp string that's in the middle, like on the bottom, on the inside corner, where you started stringing, or actually where you ended stringing your board. So I'm going to find that warp string that's in one of the corners. It's the one that I took the tape off. It might be a little tricky to find. Oh, I found it way down here. Okay, and so I'm gonna push that through with my finger so it's on the outside of my bag, if I can find it. There it is. And so now that it's on the outside of my bag, since I have the shag, I can actually just leave it hanging with my shag. I don't have to tie it to anything. If I didn't have the shag, then I would I would take this and whatever string was hanging off at the bottom from where I started my actual first color for weaving, and I would just tie those two in a double knot, trim that and push the knot so it's on the inside. Okay, so when I'm all done, if I have a cord, I'm going to put the cord in the bag so that it can be attached when it's braided. But other than that, I'm going to put my name and hour on a piece of masking tape right on the flap. So I'm going to put that right on the flap, and then I'm going to put my name and hour on there. And if I want a button attached or sewn on, I'm going to put a B on that name tag and circle it with a Sharpie marker. So when I'm going through to grade your weavings, if I open up your flap and I see your name and I see your hour and then I see a B in a corner circled, then I know that you would like me to attach a button, and I will sew those on for you if you really want one. And that's it. Then you turn it in under the cutting board.